and but I think he'd like to. I think he would like to stop fighting.
The Kremlin says the talks will begin Tuesday. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is leading the.
And good morning and welcome to the WSJM Morning Show. I'm Ken Lundberg. It's 7 o'clock on Monday, February 17th, and we are fortunate enough today to be joined by State Senator Eric Nesbitt, who is, Mike is helping him make coffee. How's it going out there?
We're nailing it.
Yeah, I apologize. The weekend crew, I think, forgot to refill the water thing.
But we got it done.
You got it done?
Yeah,
You're good? Okay, good. So so State Senator, Senate Republican leader Eric Nesbitt is out in the hallway. He's getting coffee. We'll bring him in here in just a couple of minutes. See what he's up to.
Yeah,
just a couple things happening in Lansing.
A little bit, little drama, I'm sure.
From here to there. I mean, one of these things is scheduled to go into effect on February 21st. So later this week, you could have the tipped wage situation go into effect, where the evolution of bringing the tipped wage workers out of receiving tips,
right,
and into receiving minimum wage instead, like at restaurants and bars and that kind of thing. And restaurant workers, I haven't heard a single one who said, yeah, take away my tips.
No, I would say they would be horrified.
So restaurant owners have been very vocal about this, saying, you're gonna ask us to do what? You know what our margins are currently?
Right. No, it's again, somebody making rules that doesn't really understand the business.
Yeah. So we'll talk with State Senator Eric Nesbitt about that. We'll also talk to him about his run for governor's mansion. So we'll talk about that and roads as well. I'll ask him. Maybe we can ask him to get some legislation going for studs. Let studs happen.
Yeah.
In Michigan.
Let studs happen.
That's
a good shirt.
Let studs happen. There he is right there. State Senator Eric Nesbitt. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
Exactly. He knows. We've got Senate Republican leader Eric Nesbitt in the studio this morning. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And
yeah,
a little blowy out there on the drive on over, but that's the beauty of Southwest Michigan.
How are the roads? Where'd you come in from today?
From Lawton.
Okay.
So, yeah, the roads are fine. Just take your time.
Okay, good. We've got you on the video live stream as well. So no chewing gum. Jeff said he would make sure to send the makeup kit with you.
Okay.
So no,
make it happen.
We were having fun. The
side roads were a little blowy.
Yeah,
but you saw the trucks out there now yesterday. So we have a third kid on the way due Easter Sunday.
Congratulations.
April 20th.
That's great.
So we're yesterday it was one of those things where you had those two flat boxes that you turn into a bunk bed, and I was impressed. We got that done in one afternoon. So that was, but there's a sense of accomplishment with that.
Yeah. What do you do with the extra Allen wrenches? That's what I want to know.
Throw them in the junk drawer.
Okay.
Just throw
them in all the other ones
that we never use again. Okay, we've got to get some local news in here, so we're just wrapping up with ABC News. But for this hour, we have State Senator Eric Nesbitt. He's the Republican leader. We're going to talk about tipped wage. We're going to talk about roads. We're going to talk about your race for governor. Anything else you want to talk about?
There's always a ton of things to talk about.
Anything and everything. Yeah. So we'll get it done here in just a couple of minutes with WSJM on the morning show.
Friday, saying they need more time to investigate their case. I'm Brian Clark, ABC News.
Offer not valid in all states or where prohibited by law. Loans are subject to lender approval. See website for details.
Honey, the credit card bill came and we're maxed out.
Maxed out cards, rent is due. We just need some extra cash to help us get by.
Maybe we should go to 27cash.com.
With our bad credit?
27cash.com is one of the largest personal loan networks. They can help people with any type of credit get up to $5,000, and cash can hit our bank account as soon as tomorrow.
When you need extra cash, go to 27cash.com. That's 27cash.com. 27cash.com.
WSJM News Now. Team coverage from the WSJM Newsroom on News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM.
Oh my goodness. Already it begins. Good morning. It's the WSJM Morning Show. I'm Ken Lundberg here with Mike Weibel as my co-host. I only bring him in on Mondays and Fridays. Okay. And it's like a fun cut-up kind of thing. We have a good time. State Senator Eric Nesbitt, his first comment in the studio this morning was, it takes two of you now to do this thing, huh?
Back up.
Good morning and welcome to the WSJM studios, Senator. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We'll be talking with State Senator Eric Nesbitt. He's the Republican leader in just a couple of moments. He's also running for governor. So we'll talk with him in just a few moments. And I think I had your microphone up, so I apologize on that. But you didn't say anything bad, so that's good.
That I know of.
No, it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, you're welcoming a third child coming. When is this?
April 20th. Easter Sunday is the due date, but boy, my wife's ready. She's measuring about 2 weeks ahead of schedule right now.
Really?
And so, like the other two, they were born a week early,
Okay.
and they were both 9 pounds 7 ounces.
Boy,
So
yeah.
this one sure seems like it's coming in right about the same.
That's great. Well, congratulations. We look forward to that. Does that stall budget negotiations at all? Does the governor give you a pass on that one?
They say a big baby is a healthy baby, isn't that true? And
Sure.
we're blessed, and this week we're trying to deal with saving paid time off and saving 50,000 restaurant jobs this week, and we'll see where the budget negotiations go over the next 6 months. And my hope is that we can find ways to pay down long-term debt, cut the state income tax, and actually put a roads funding plan together.
We'll talk about all those issues and more coming up in just a couple of minutes. Thank you very much. State Senator Eric Nesbitt is here in the studio this hour. The forecast for today, and then we'll get some local news, and we'll come back with that interview. Partly cloudy skies, 20% chance of snow showers, a high today around 12 degrees. We already breached that a little bit as far as what you see on the thermometer. But again, the feels like temperature is -4 in Benton Harbor right now. Tonight's forecast, mostly cloudy, a 20% chance of snow showers continuing, a low overnight around 7, west winds 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tuesday's forecast, mostly cloudy, a 30% chance of snow showers, high around 15, and northwest winds 10 to 15 miles per hour. Some of the news that we've been following in the WSJM newsroom today, the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi has announced the establishment of a new limited liability corporation entity that will pursue developments outside of Southwest Michigan. And they say the Four Winds Ventures LLC is looking for opportunities in the development, management, and operation of businesses in commercial gaming, hospitality, and related sectors. Four Winds Venture Board Chair Mary Smith tells us, after operating Four Winds Casino in New Buffalo since 2007, the tribe sees a need to extend its reach, and it says it already has the knowledge on how to do that.
Other than commercial gaming, there's hospitality and other related business sectors that we thought would be good opportunities for us to get a broader reach across the nation.
Smith says with Four Winds Ventures, the Pokagons could potentially operate new businesses across the country and even around the world.
We may initially find something in this area, but the plan and goal is to really reach that further out across the nation, and hopefully in the near future or future, be able to even potentially expand that to be, outside of the U.S.
Smith tells us Four Winds Ventures would benefit the tribe's 6,300 members by providing the tribe with even greater resources for housing, medical care, and education. Plus, more revenue means more opportunities for cultural preservation. So far, the Pokagon Band Tribal Council has appointed 5 executives to the Four Winds Ventures board, and Smith says they're looking for 2 more. We have a link with more information at our website, WSJM.com. The Berrien County Board of Commissioners is looking at ways to better protect the Lake Michigan shoreline around the city of St. Joseph, following up on a similar meeting the city had earlier this year. The county board has heard from Edgewater President Greg Wycamp about a grant-funded shoreline softening study that's been conducted to consider how to maintain beaches and prevent erosion. Wycamp said the traditional way that the beaches have been maintained is through replenishment, that is, pumping sand that's been dredged out of the harbor back onto the beach. He said it's especially necessary south of the St. Joseph Piers because of how sand naturally moves out into the lake.
As the flow and the currents move down, the sand is drawn off the shoreline and it creates the sort of flow. And it will continue south until it hits an obstacle like a navigational pier. And that's why you can see on the north side, we always have, if you look at Google Earth sometime, you'll always see that the beach is bigger on the north side of the river, or the navigation structures on the south side.
Wycamp said that's why Lions Park Beach often needs more attention than Silver Beach, but there's still enough sand moving around the piers naturally to replenish Silver Beach, but it sort of peters out before reaching Lions Park. He's proposing the construction of a series of breakwaters to catch and hold that sand.
You're used to seeing big, long, continuous breakwaters. The strategy we're moving towards now is what we call segmented breakwaters or detached breakwaters.
Wycamp said that strategy has been used in other states like Florida. He showed graphics of the breakwaters, which are strategically placed piles of rocks off the shore. He said a side benefit from that is they provide habitat for wildlife. The county commission said they'd take that presentation under advisement. That's a look at some of the local news that we're covering. We have a whole lot to talk about this hour with State Senator Eric Nesbitt. He's running for governor, but he's also the Republican leader in the Senate, and they have a whole lot happening right now. Tipped wage is the big one this week. We'll talk about that in just a moment right here on the WSJM Morning Show. If you want to tune in on the video live stream, we have it up currently on YouTube and Facebook. We'll continue that conversation. We have sports right now, and then we'll have a couple of ads, and then we'll be back with State Senator Nesbitt in just a moment.
Sports on the Michigan News Network. Sponsored by Mitch Lyons Wealth.
Jay Cunningham.
All right, and back on the video live stream with State Senator Eric Nesbitt. Good morning and welcome again to the WSJM studios.
Hey, good morning. I don't know how you hop around so much and keep it all straight, but you must have some experience doing this.
It's the coffee. Yeah. I go for 4 espresso shots in the morning. And
am I on the radio? Am I on the live stream? What am I doing? Who am I talking to?
We're there.
The good news is we're talking to all of Southwest Michigan, and they are hearing a lot of different messages. We've been talking about budget. We've been talking about roads. We've been talking about tipped wage. We'll get back on the radio here in just a moment and talk more about that tipped wage. But maybe for those who haven't been keeping up with the situation, what is the tipped wage issue and why has it become one?
Yeah, so whenever the minimum wage is created in the different states and nationally, there's usually an exemption on those that earn their money from tips.
Right.
And so you had to pay them the minimum wage either way, but there was a sub-minimum wage where it would make it. And so businesses have created their own, they've created these full-service restaurants around this model. And workers have depended on tips to make their living. And you talk to some of these bartenders and wait staff, and I mean, they can make $30-40 an hour, some of these nights. And there's a flexibility that comes with the system that we have now. And then it's all based on speed, friendliness, productivity.
Yeah.
And people can make some good money wait staffing or bartending. You create good relationships through it, and there's some flexibility that's there. These out-of-state groups came in a few years ago to push a ballot initiative, and probably looking at it 2020, we should have just fought it then back in 18. And it was defeated in Massachusetts, which is a fairly liberal state. Probably the most liberal state
outside of California. Yeah.
But the eliminating the tip wage last year was voted down 2-1 in Massachusetts. And so I do think there's a popular opposition against it in disrupting what is the full service restaurant model here. If the Supreme Court's decision last summer, which forced this onto the state, went into full effect, we figured it'd mean 50,000 restaurant jobs would be lost around Michigan. DC did a similar thing a few years ago, and Washington DC is a smaller municipality, smaller government, and I think there's about 3,500 restaurant jobs that were lost in the first year. And so we're already seeing some of those models change over. And then there was another thing that would have a one-size-fit-all sick leave policy. I mean, we all support having paid time off or sick leave for people that sick shouldn't show up. But a lot of businesses have moved into a paid time off model. And if you want to attract the best and brightest workers, you have a very generous paid time off. That would eliminate the paid time off and having a one-size-fits-all sick leave policy. And you've talked to workers, and I talked to manufacturers and small business owners, and it creates a less generous program from having the state interfere in this way. And so these all go into effect on Friday if nothing happens legislatively. And so Last Thursday, we were in session late, about 8:30, passed a bipartisan plan to save the tip wages and save tens of thousands of restaurant jobs. That passed out of the Senate. House passed a proposal nearly a month ago to solve both of these problems. So we have, 4 days to figure it out.
Plenty of time.
Yeah, I mean, you have a Democratic Senate, Republican House.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, on Thursday, the Democrat leadership allowed the Republicans to carry the day. I mean, there was more a majority of the minority party, the Republican Party in the Senate, passed the legislation, and a minority of the majority party, the Democrats, voted for it. But it was something where I'm glad that the restaurant workers and bartenders that have been showing up over the last 7-8 months are actually being heard.
They've been very vocal. Let's talk about that in just a moment right here on the WSJM Morning Show. We're talking with State Senator Eric Nesbitt. Continue that interview in just a second right here on WSJM.
Mostly cloudy, lake effect snow showers possible. Very light still. We dropped to 7. And tomorrow, lake effect snow showers, a couple of inches of accumulation possible with a high of 15. I'm Chief Meteorologist Carrie Peugeot.
The Morning Show with Ken and Friends on 94.9 WSJM.
It's 7:16. It's the WSJM Morning Show. Good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us. And joining us in studio this morning, in addition to my normal Monday, Friday co-host, Mike Weibel, we've got State Senator Eric Nesbitt in, who's the Republican leader for the state Senate. And things in Lansing are really popping. We just heard on the video live stream a little bit about the background of why we need to work on this tipped wage legislation issue, which faces a Friday deadline. And by Friday, if you don't have a fix in place, restaurant owners say they're going to start to go out of business because the minimum wage is going to start coming up and they won't be able to afford to pay their workers. But you negotiated a compromise. Can you just give an outline of that compromise? How is that going to work? And is this something that the House is going to have time to consider between now and Friday?
Yeah, so Friday's deadline is what the state Supreme Court set up. And if fully implemented, we're looking at a loss of 50,000 restaurant jobs, bartenders, wait staff, positions that will be eliminated from the full service restaurant industry. And also from polling, 98% of wait staff and bartenders says they don't want to change in the current system. They feel it's actually working for them and working families. 2, restaurant owners, we're expecting 1 in 5 to go out of business if nothing changes. So look at the full service restaurants, talking 20% of those would be eliminated when this is fully phased in. Unfortunately, on Thursday, we found a bipartisan consensus in the Senate to pass. It's over in the House now. The House passed their version about a month ago. My conversations with the leadership in the Republican House is that if we can find a way of saving paid time off this week, I think we can get both of the bills to the governor's desk by the end of the week. Now, the governor last week said, let's just punt it till July,
Right.
which is, I think, the worst of ideas because July, as you know, in the restaurant industry is the is the busiest time of the year
For Michigan. Absolutely.
Especially
Tourist
along-
season.
Yeah, especially along the lakeshore from New Buffalo to Petoskey and all, and then the rest
all
of the
the
way
Ubers.
around. Yep. And so the landing spot was, instead of a full phase out of the tip credit and phasing out tips, that it goes from less than 40%, and it's a 6-year phase into about 50% of the tip credit. But at the end of the day, this is about saving restaurant workers' jobs and making sure that they have an ability to earn a lot more than just minimum wage.
Yeah. Was this a solution in search of a problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are seeing this now around the nation. This was originally passed along the West Coast, where you saw Seattle, parts of California, that it was a way for unions to unionize restaurant workers by closing down a lot of the small mom and pops businesses, which are a lot tougher to unionize, and then pushing it where your corporate owned stores, your Dardens, your Olive Gardens and Red Lobsters, those kind of full service are easier targets to unionize. And the interesting thing is, last year when they tried to push it into New England, Massachusetts defeated it 2-1. And as we know, Massachusetts is usually pretty open for business for left-wing ideas, and even there, this was defeated last year.
Yeah. Do you think the Senate compromise will be voted on straight up or down in the House?
We'll see where this goes, because now you have the two issues with paid time off and the tip credit, and so this week, my conversations with the leadership in the Michigan State House show that they feel that this version would be able to get through the House. Now we're negotiating on saving paid time off at the same idea. But I think going back to your question, was this solution in search of a problem? Nobody in state was asking for this. This was something where you had out-of-state interests that had millions and millions of dollars, and our ballot proposal process worked to put this on the ballot in 18, and through an adopted amendment measure in 18 that I don't have to go into all the intricacies or complications. I guess if it was a 3-hour podcast, we could go into that. But the
That's at 8 o'clock.
Yeah. But the bottom line is that it's been 6 years of going through the courts. They always say one of the greatest thing about America is the endless appeal system, and you saw that play out over the last 5 or 6 years. And now the legislature has to deal with it, with the way the Supreme Court, in a partisan decision, a 4-3 decision, said that they essentially created law. The way the legislature handled this in 18, they said that the Constitution's silent on this in Michigan, and then the Supreme Court just created law out of the Constitution being silent. If Constitution is silent, that means the legislature should have the ability to do what they did. But unfortunately, they listened to the out-of-state special interests, and now we're having to deal with this.
How do you see the paid time off shaken out?
Yeah, so the biggest issues is their exemptions on small businesses or charitable organizations. I mean, I was talking to the president of Western Michigan University the other day, and he says that it would cost at one institution $5 million a year. And so that's tuition, that's state taxpayer support, or that's foundational support. I mean, those are the three areas that they get money as donors, the state, or tuition.
Yeah.
Right. And so he's saying you build that on to everything else that's going on, and that's going to have to put pressure elsewhere, either on the state budget or on tuition increases. Those are the two most likely areas. And you extrapolate that out to every manufacturer, every nonprofit, charity, school districts. There's you look at it, you could not show up and call in to work for 3 days in a row.
Right.
How are you supposed to find substitutes?
Yeah.
Right.
In schools? And so I think there's a real challenge that's happening under this legislation, just a real practical challenge. Even if you support a state mandated sick leave policy, the way this was written was insane.
Yeah. Does this one have to get fixed by this Friday as well?
Yes, both have a February 21st implementation day.
Okay. Chances?
I give it better than 50-50 now.
Okay.
I think there's a landing spot on both of them. Won't make me happy on where we're, if there was a Republican House and Senate and a Republican governor. But at the end of the day, with split government, you got to be able to solve this problem as best as possible. And I think there is a solution. At the end of the day is will the Senate Democratic leadership put up for the vote?
Yeah.
House has solved both of them. They're in the Senate chamber. We could have passed both of these 3 weeks ago and solved these issues. But when you're negotiating, sometimes it takes a little longer. It's kind of like when you're in college and you had a final paper due at 6 a.m. Why not stay up till 3, 4 in the morning to finish it, right?
You must know my sons. We're talking with State Senator Eric Nesbitt. He's the Republican leader in Lansing for the Senate, and we're talking about a whole number of issues. We just got done talking about tipped wages and what solution they're hopefully aiming toward by this Friday or before, also the paid sick leave time. But Senator Nesbitt, you also mentioned it's split government in Lansing right now. You've got a House controlled by the Republicans, the Senate controlled by the Democrats, the governor's mansion controlled by Governor Whitmer. How has it been? How has it been different, if at all, in the last 60 days?
Well, you look at the last 2 years when there was a 1-seat majority in both the House and Senate, when they rammed through a lot of left-wing ideas. And fortunately, in December, there was one brave Democrat that walked off the floor with House Republicans, and we slowed down a lot of items that would have been bad and destroyed small businesses and families here in the state that I believe were anti-worker, anti-business, and anti-family. The last 6 weeks you've seen with divided government is that you actually have to create and reach a consensus on anything that gets to the governor's desk, which is something that a lot of people talk about on the campaign trail.
Yeah.
But actually creating the trust and working together is a different world. And I think it's a real challenge for some of the Democrats that have been used to the last 2 years where they've just been able to ram and jam their policy without sitting down. I mean, you take the energy bill 15 months ago, they passed on a partisan basis. And I'm somebody in 2016 that worked together on passing an energy bill that got 2/3 of the Republicans and 2/3 of the Democrats' support. Real novel concept where you had to work across the
bipartisan,
aisle and find a landing spot. Was it perfect? No, but it was something where I think it was adaptable, was flexible, creating more affordable energy and more diverse energy and all of the above energy policy, but it also ended a lot of the mandates. And now 15 months ago, when they started to create this 2 summers ago, create this energy bill 2 summers ago, they purposely said, we're just going to ignore the Republicans, ignore their ideas, and we're going to ram this through. And what you have now is an energy bill that if we don't change it over the coming years, will require 300,000 acres of farm and forest land to be industrialized around the state. 300,000 acres of farmland to be industrialized around the state. And so you get consequences like that when you have folks they care more about the folks in San Francisco or New York City that will make money off from those Chinese-made solar arrays that they're installing on clear-cut forest land, like what you saw 6 weeks ago, that the DNR was going to sell off 400 acres of their land to put solar arrays on, or leveling out farmland, some of the most productive farmland to create these solar arrays without looking at reliability and affordability.
Yeah. We're talking with State Senator Eric Nesbitt. He's the Republican leader. We've got to get a couple of commercials in. We'll come back on the radio here in just a few moments and continue this interview. We'll continue it right now. Just keep it going. We just keep the truck rolling, Senator. So we'll do that on the video live stream. So if you want to hear that unedited conversation, we'll continue it here on YouTube and on Facebook, right here on the WSJM Morning Show.
So, you want a free checking account that pays you a high rate on your balance? Yeah.
And continuing on the video live stream at 7:28 on Monday, February 17th. We're so fortunate to have the Republican leader in the Senate, Eric Nesbitt, here. He's also running for governor. How's it going?
I've been blessed. Now, on the live stream, that means it's not FCC.
That is correct.
So you can use more
whatever you are comfortable with.
Okay. So
you can flash gang signs or whatever you want to
do. You can have you can go back to your 8th grade French class.
That's right.
Figure out what it all means and says.
Yeah.
Talk like a sailor, but no. So yeah, announced for governor. January 14th.
Yeah,
so it's been a month.
Walk us through that decision. Why did you decide? And by the way, I heard some colorful language of why you guys getting ready to go for it. Walk us through that.
Yeah. So after the last few years, a lot of people have approached me to take a look at it to run for governor. They needed somebody I think has a proven record of being able to win elections, somebody who has a vision for the future that can put Michigan first. But my most important thing in looking at it is, what does that look like at home for the family? Because it's tough enough running in today's world for a state senate or a state house or a congressional seat. But, those are a defined area of, 100,000 people, 260,000 people, 700,000. Michigan's big, 10 million people. And I've had interviews just in the last week in person from Detroit to Marquette to St. Joe. So we've kind of went to 3 corners of the state art just in the last week.
Yeah.
And so it is a big sacrifice, and especially on the family. And so that's been the biggest conversations over the last few months before we announced in January was, well, my wife, what does that support? What does that infrastructure look like at home? And a week before we announced, I leaned over and I'm like, are we really going to do this? And a good Polish Catholic girl that she is, she goes, my team says I should say heck yeah, but she goes, it was an expletive yeah. So it was,
it was another word, very colorful.
Yeah.
Starts with an F.
Very enthusiastic.
Yeah. Before we went to bed, and it was something where Michigan deserves a governor that works just as hard as the hardworking Michiganders do, and somebody that's more concerned with the kids being able to read at grade level instead of how many books you sell in Hyannisport or in San Francisco. And right now, only 3 out of 4 fourth graders read at grade level in Michigan. That's the average. And you can only imagine how much tougher it is in some of the poor urban or rural areas around the state. Same with 8th graders. Only 3 out of 4 8th graders are able to read at grade level.
Read at level. That's crazy. I mean, you think about artificial intelligence and some of the studies we saw. We suspected this long ago, but the studies are now proving that the ability for people, including young people, to think critically when they rely too much on AI, that's one of the big detriments. Their ability to think critically goes down. And so if they don't have that foundation and they don't have the tools to be able to get that foundation, where do you go?
So I just look at education. I mean, it's one of the biggest issues in Michigan of our time is how are you able to actually reform the education level here in the state that the children are able, I call it just getting back to basics. Just get back to basics, reading, writing, arithmetic. Let's make sure that they're covering the basics. But you'd expect other states, maybe Utah, Iowa have a little better reading scores. There's a history of that, but Mississippi has better reading scores than Michigan does right now.
That's shocking.
Yeah.
But it's the reforms at the state level driven by leadership at the local level and what kind of accountability and choice you have. In the last few years between the COVID lockdowns, which has been the toughest, some of the toughest in the nations, where you see students lose about 1.5 years of education. That's something that the Stanford Princeton study showed about a year ago that when it came out, that during those lockdowns, the students lost over 1 year of educational advancement. And then you match that over the last 2 years where the governor, along with the majority of Democrats, repealed some of these accountability measures on reading, on how teachers are measured on performance levels, and some clear-cut grading efforts on school districts too, so parents and teachers actually know what's being taught in the classrooms. And so it's not rocket science, but it takes a lot of leadership, and there's policies that actually matter here in the state. I mean, you look at Florida 20 years ago, they were a bottom 10 reading state. Now they're a top 10 state. And there are reforms that can happen if followed through that can make sure that the students are the primary. That's part of my students first agenda.
Yeah, let's talk about that in just a moment right here on the WSJM Morning Show.
The Morning Show with Ken Lundberg on WSJM.
It's 13 degrees in Benton Harbor, 734. WSJM Morning Show continues. I'm Ken Lundberg. Here with me is Mike Weibel as my co-host. And then in the guest chair this morning, none other than State Senator Eric Nesbitt. Can you believe who we let in today?
I know, and he had a knock to get in.
Did he have to? Oh, because our doorbell's broken. Right. Honestly, it's only been broken 2 days, Senator. So
okay, well that makes sense because when we schedule it, I'm looking at ring the doorbell.
You're probably calling Jeff, going, "What in the world is going on? What'd you get me into this time?" We're talking with State Senator Eric Nesbitt. He's the Republican leader for the Senate in Lansing. We're talking about budget. We're talking about education. In fact, on the video live stream, we're talking about some of the shocking statistics and how Mississippi students have a better reading level.
Yes.
Than kids in Michigan right now, which, I mean, no slight against Mississippi, but come on, we're Michigan, darn it. And so anyway, we'll talk about some of his planned solutions for that should he get into the governor's house. We'll talk about that and more in just a moment right here on the WSJM Morning Show. We've got ABC News now.
ABC News, I'm Brian Clark. The hospitalized since Friday has now been diagnosed with a respiratory tract infection, and that all findings indicate a, quote, complex clinical picture for the 88-year-old that require further hospitalization. At least 9 people in Kentucky, 1 in Georgia, are dead because of extensive flooding, says ABC's Jim Ryan.
Even longtime residents of Bullitt County, Kentucky, are shocked by the ferocity of the winter storm.
It has flooded here before because we've been here 29 years, but never as bad as it did last night.
Jen Cox raises donkeys and cattle south of Louisville.
It started coming down pretty hard, so I was like, I'm going to go ahead and go out and check. And as soon as I walked around the garage, everything was flooded.
Elon Musk expected to meet today with air traffic controllers to discuss how the FAA can be more efficient. His Department of Government Efficiency continues its work. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has arrived in Saudi Arabia ahead of U.S. talks with Russia over ending the war in Ukraine. This is ABC News.
WSJM News Now. Team coverage from the WSJM Newsroom on News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM.
In the WSJM newsroom, we've got some news that we're following this morning. Just taking a preview of the stories that we'll bring you at 8 o'clock today. Definitely some golf stories. No, maybe not. Maybe.
Sure, go there.
Mike's very excited because we brought up golf, and he's like, hey, wait, what? Some of the news stories that we're bringing to you at 8 o'clock this morning. Major grant funding for projects in Benton Harbor like the Bobo Brazil Center and the Ox Creek restoration are facing new challenges as the fight over federal spending continues in Washington. In jeopardy, that $16 million EPA grant that was supposed to go to the Bobo Brazil Center. We'll tell you a little bit more about that at 8 o'clock. State Representative Joey Andrews says the compromise reached in the Michigan Senate on the tipped wage isn't perfect, but it's better than previous proposals. We've been getting an earful on that from State Senator Eric Nesbitt here this morning on the WSJM Morning Show, so we'll have a little bit more on that. And then also in the newsroom this morning, as we've been mentioning, the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi announced the establishment of a new LLC, limited liability corporation entity, that's going to pursue developments outside of Southwest Michigan for gaming, hospitality, and related services. Those stories and more coming up in the 8 o'clock hour right here on WSJM. It's 7:37. We're continuing our interview with Eric Nesbitt. We'll have it on the live stream for a couple of minutes, then we'll come back on the radio right here on WSJM's Morning Show.
The Michigan News Network.
All right. You probably, good morning and welcome back to the video live stream. We're talking with State Senator Eric Nesbitt. He's the Republican leader in Lansing for the Senate. And you probably, being in your role, in your position, you probably get invited to a lot of different things.
There's quite a few things that you get invited to. Some really cool things. Like I've been at the top of the the Mackinac Bridge, which
like
is
on the actual top of it,
at one of the towers at the very top.
Oh, wow.
I mean, so you get invited. The Mackinac Bridge Authority. It's probably about 10 years ago.
Was that scary as all get out?
I mean, I climbed silos growing up, and
yeah.
So you're used to.
And I think there's taller than a silo, though.
Yeah,
Senator.
but there's a lot more safety procedures.
all right.
Mackinac Bridge than there is back on the farm in the silo. Let's be honest.
That's true. Good point.
Salt. The salt mine's 1,400 feet below Detroit. And the neat thing is the bottom I was seeing, Getman Corporation up in Bangor, 90% of their work they export to, overseas and mining equipment.
Yeah.
But as I'm 1,400 feet below Detroit going through the salt mines that's still producing salt, right?
Wow.
That you had Getman Corporation, some of their underground mining equipment underneath there. And so those are, you get some neat experiences like that.
Yeah.
And but again, the regulatory levels and the budgets, you figure that there's 1,001 issues that are out there. When I first got elected, one of my mentors says you can be an inch deep and a mile wide on so many different issues, because you're dealing with insurance to agriculture to healthcare to budget, budget and everything in between, natural resources, and how do you become an expert on a few different things, and how do you rely on other folks for some of those issues?
You were talking a moment ago about education and some of the solutions that you have in mind if you're elected governor. what are those solutions? How are you going to fix it? How are you going to bring Michigan back up and above and be one of the shining stars in the United States?
I remember when we were dealing with the Detroit bankruptcy issue about 10 years ago for the schools, and I did a tour of some of the Detroit schools, and I got away from the administrators, the actual tour guides, and talked to some of the parents and some of the students in the office or in the classroom. You know, I'm usually a wanderer like that. Sometimes I never like the official tour.
Yeah, you get the best information off the track.
And actually ask questions that are non-scripted that aren't part of that. And my takeaway from some of these parents then, and I think it's still a challenge now, is that they were more concerned with whether or not their kid would come home alive or safe. Secondarily was education. But when you're having to deal with safety issues first, that there's a real challenge. And so that comes down to the leadership at the schools. That comes down to the leadership at the school building. That comes down to having the best and brightest teachers in the classroom. And I think there's some big opportunities to have on a structural reform, from how the schools are constitutionally administered. I've been pushing for some major reforms on that front of having, being able to drive some of these reforms. And that's part of the challenge, is that right now this state school board, which nobody knows who's on the state school board, drive some of these reforms instead of the governor actually being able to drive some of those. I'd like to see a change in that. But most importantly, it comes through accountability and choice in the school system. And I think that's making sure that kids are able to read by third grade, that there's actually accountability measures that are built into that. The teachers are rewarded for the growth in their class. I get it. Maybe when they come in at 7th grade, they're only at a 3rd grade level. But if you can raise them to a 5th grade, 2 or 3 grade levels in 1 year at 7th grade, and maybe they're only at a 5th grade, I think they should be rewarded for something like that, because they're taking on part of, on a challenge. And I think teachers should be able to be rewarded if they're in some of the higher need, districts, and our system today doesn't allow for that. And so as you look at it, how do you provide with families and students that they're actually coming first in the system? And I think that's through a choice and accountability. Enough of these, 70 pronouns in the school districts, or how do you actually go back to basics? And then in high school, how do you create career pathways? Those that want to go on to college, I think the merit curriculum probably works for those, but those that want to go into a licensed profession, whether that's plumbing, pipe fitting, whether that's manufacturing, high-tech engineering, computer coding. I don't think the merit curriculum is working for them right now. My oldest brother, he did co-op and diesel mechanics when he was in high school. I did dual enrollment and I think I graduated with 25 college credits when I finished high school. Yeah. Creating those pathways, I think, are so important to figure out what that spark is in that young person. If you're serious about making sure you have folks that are passionate about the careers that they're going into, whether it's medicine or construction or agriculture, a lot of it requires more than just a high school degree.
Okay. And we'll finish that thought in just a moment. Sorry about that. We got to get back on the radio, and we'll talk about roads as well, right here on the WSJM Morning Show.
But we continue to see snow showers during the day today, very light areas. Temperatures today will be in the lower to middle teens. Tonight, mostly cloudy, lake effect snow showers possible, very light still. We drop to 7. And tomorrow, lake effect snow showers, a couple of inches of accumulation possible with a high of 15. I'm Chief Meteorologist Carrie Peugeot.
The Morning Show with Ken and Friends on 94.9 WSJM.
7:44, it's the WSJM Morning Show. It continues. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ken Lundberg, here with me, Mike Weibel, and our guest this morning, our special in-studio guest. Thanks for making a rare. This is the first time we've had a special guest in studio who isn't Mike.
Yeah. Monday and Friday.
On Mondays. So we have State Senator Eric Nesbitt. He's the Republican leader in the Senate. We were just talking about education. Anything further on that before we change topics?
I mean, we can talk about education. I do think with myself having a young family, it's just such an important issue of making sure that we lay out accountability measures, we provide choice for families, and we actually provide pathways for high school students to figure out what their best course in life is.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the talk that is happening in Washington, D.C. as far as dismantling the Department of Education, how does that make planning on a state level when you're thinking about from a policy perspective? How does that make that more challenging, or does it?
I mean, federal funding makes up mid-upper single digits of overall education funding. The bulk of education funding is from the local and state level, 90+%.
Right.
But I'd say 60-70% of the regulations are driven by the federal government right now. And this is something I hear time after time talking to folks on the front line. And I think this is something where, Congressman Wahlberg, who represents the southern half of Berrien County, is now the chair of the Education and Workforce Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's part of that leadership team. And as you look at it, I do think providing some opportunities that President Trump's doing at the federal level can provide some innovation at the state level. Take off a lot of the regulations, block grant it to the states, and we can probably figure out preschool a lot better than the federal government can figure it out. We can figure out behavioral health and mental health issues a lot better than the federal government. Makes it fit. Believe me, Michigan's different than Texas.
Yeah.
Texas is different than California. And you drive some of these innovations at the state level instead of this one size fits all federal government mandate that we've seen from the education department. Let's be honest. The last 45 years since the Department of Education has been created, our test scores have gone down. Our accountability measures, in terms of performance measures have gone down. And so something's not working in the United States on education since the Department of Education has been built. And so if you can drive innovation at the state level and federalism at the state level, get away from these partisan talking points that you've seen. It's like, oh, this means the end of the world if you do away with the Department of Education. If you block grant it to the states, I think there can be a laboratory of democracy, there can be a laboratory of innovation, and there can be a laboratory of results that can happen.
We're talking with State Senator Eric Nesbitt. He's running for governor. He's also the Senate Republican leader, and we've been talking about roads. And before we get into, so the governor has a plan for $3 billion, raise taxes on tech companies, and also on pot users. So I guess tax pot to get potholes filled or something along those lines.
I call it the Zen and Sin tax policy. So tax your tins and any of the online, in Amazon, like really it's your package deliveries, your Amazon deliveries, and everything else is new tax on all that.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe we can talk about that. But before we get to that, how do you feel about studs on your tires? You ever driven anywhere? I've got the senator here. I might as well ask. So, I mean, where I was raised in Washington State, you were allowed to drive until April 1 with studs on your tires, so you don't get, the icy roads don't slow commerce down. What do you think about in Michigan? Don't give me it's going to tear up the roads.
Were you? Yeah, they're already torn up. Let's be honest. I mean, in your hill country, I don't know where you were, central.
Yeah, Eastern Washington. So it's a lot of plains,
and
ice, black ice.
I mean, again, some of the studs today are very different than they were the chains 40 years ago.
Right.
And so I suppose it depends on where they're at the local level.
I sense an opening, Mike. I sense.
I think so.
But no, seriously.
I've never studied the issue intently.
Right.
So
I'll send you some papers. I like it.
Everything else going on.
We'll take yes as an answer. So, but no, Senator Nesbitt.
We always had a tractor to pull us out if we had some issues. So.
Same, and I enjoyed it. Thank the tractors. No, but on the roads proposal, seriously, what's on the table for people who don't know? There's about $3 billion we're talking about.
Yeah. So 7 years ago, Governor Whitmer campaigned for office on fixing the damn roads. And unfortunately, over the last 6 years, since her first proposal of raising the gas tax by 45 cents and increasing small business taxes by over 40%, their only proposal she's had is increase borrowing to pay for some of the road construction that you see going on. The $3.5 billion of borrowing loans that she's made, it's going to mean $6 billion of payment back over the next 20 years. And so the last few months, the House Republicans, and I've supported, is they found $3 billion of revenue in the existing budget that can go to roads, and the governor keeps coming back with increased taxes. And we're not going to go down that increased tax road. Michiganders are paying enough in taxes to fix the damn roads. And the end of the day is that we can find the money in the current budget if we prioritize. And what we've seen from this governor is that she'd rather expand social welfare programs instead of fixing our infrastructure and keeping her campaign promise. And that's what we're going to work on is this year, is through the budget negotiations, is trying to keep her campaign promise.
Yeah, seeing the tipped wage issue, I mean, and the paid sick leave, that's two issues, but basically it's one small package. The negotiation between the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion, how, if that is any kind of barometer indicator of how negotiations can go, how are you going to do on budget?
I mean, it's all about people being willing to find a consensus and find a landing spot. And
Are they showing ability or likelihood?
Sometimes you got to walk away to be able to find the consensus. You know, that's kind of the Reagan belief, is that sometimes you make the best deal when when you're willing to walk away from the table. And I'm going to be defending the hardworking taxpayers of the state of Michigan at every turn as we work on any budget negotiations. I always have, and I always will. What we saw last week was 2 weeks ago, I didn't think we could come to a deal on the tip credit. And again, sometimes when you get into a deadline, that you have to be willing to find that landing spot. And so as I look at this year's budget, how are we going to cut the state's income tax, continue to pay down long-term debt so that our children and grandchildren get a check instead of a bill? And how do we fix the roads? In 2 years ago, with a $9 billion surplus that I thought was frittered away around the state, if we would have just taken $1.5 billion of that would have fixed every critical condition local bridge in the state. So just a sixth of that surplus would have fixed every local critical condition bridge in the state. But that takes somebody with grit and determination that they want to do the right thing.
Yeah. We're talking with State Senator Eric Nesbitt, and we're going to come back in just a moment, do our Moody on the Market update. We're going to make it all about your run for governor. So we'll talk about that in just a moment right here on WSJM.
Rich Brand and Tara Halsey from Insurance Management Service, your local auto owner's insurance agency in St. Joseph and Niles, know it means something to have peace of mind knowing your insurance is taken care of.
I want to just tell my clients thank you. That's why I come to work every day.
Senator, you have a great radio voice. We're back on the video live stream here. No, Mike went to school for money stuff, so he's smart in the money area. I'm just smart in no area, and so that's why they put me in radio. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, I started in high school. I knocked on I think I told you this story before. I knocked on the local radio station door until they let me in and let me do stuff.
I did that this morning.
Yeah, exactly. See, now you know. Now you know. But with journalism especially, I think it's an important thing that you're not just in that ivory tower from the beginning of your career to the end of your career. You've got to get the diverse experiences to understand what it is to work on a golf course and repair ball dents for minimum wage, or work in a restaurant as a dishwasher, or work in Washington, D.C. as a communications person. Done all those things. And it makes me, it gives me I think what I hope are better questions to ask to really get to the truth.
Yeah, whether it was scraping the Holden area at 5:30 in the morning so you could take the car to school, or whether a soda jerk would, over the hayloft in Decatur. You guys might know what those guys are, but scooping ice cream and a soda jerk at the hayloft.
Yeah, love that.
Summer, so
love that.
If you ever been to the hayloft in Decatur, you know how big those scoops are too. So. No, it is something where, and this is part of the reason why I'm running for governor, is really put Michigan workers first. The last 6 years, this governor spent $4.5 billion on corporate welfare that hasn't created the jobs that have been promised and could have fixed so many bridges and roads and done real worker training. And at the end of the day, it's about who's representing the hardworking Michiganders, and they deserve a state government that works for them instead of them working for the state government. And that's part of my Michigan Workers First agenda, Michigan Families First agenda, Michigan Students First agenda. And as I travel around the state, just this last week, I've been in Detroit, Marquette, Gaylord, and now St. Joe, Benton Harbor. Is that I'm going to continue to travel the state. And that's something that President Trump showed last year, is that you got to engage these communities where they're at and continue to work hard over the next year and a half to listen to those hardworking Michigan family stories around the state. And I'm going to represent them up in Lansing.
Okay. Let's we'll do our Moody on the Market update. We'll conclude this interview. We'll be right back. We're talking with State Senator Eric Nesbitt. He's running for governor. That's coming up in just a moment right here on WSJM. It's the WSJM Morning Show, 7:55. Good morning and welcome back to the video live stream and the radio. Sorry, we do all kinds of different broadcasts.
So that was the live stream before?
That was the live stream. Yeah. His head's spinning because we have so many different buttons that we're pushing here. But this is part of that Moody on the Market update brought to you by Insurance Management Service. Call IMS today, your local auto owner's insurance agency in St. Joseph and Niles. We've talked to you about a lot of different issues this morning, Senator. When you're thinking about running for governor, or when you have people thinking about your run for governor, what do you want them to know?
I want them to know that Michiganders deserve so much better out of Lansing than what they're getting today. And that means that it's going to require a governor that works just as hard as they do. And that's why I've pushed forward a Michigan Families First agenda, a Michigan Workers First agenda, a Michigan Students First agenda. I grew up on a 6th-generation dairy and grape farm here in Southwest Michigan. I understand hard work. I understand the importance of education and our traditional values. I understand getting back to basics. It's in education, that's in workforce development, economic development, and that's in education, making sure that we increase accountability measures and empower parents and create more choice in the system. And I announced so early because I want to engage communities around the state, listen to them. They're very diverse communities, whether it's Muslim Americans in Dearborn, whether it's auto workers in Downriver, whether it's timbermen up in the UP, or those that depend on the hospitality and tourism industry along the lakeshore here. I want to listen to those stories and get to work in Lansing for them and shake up the bureaucracy. Because if we do nothing as a state, the next 30 years, we're going to go from a state of 10 million people to a state of 9.3 million people, lose 700,000 net people in this state over the next 30 years. So we got to step up to this moment, step up to this time. And that's what I'm going to be doing over the next year and a half as I run for governor.
What kind of reaction are you receiving out there?
I've been blessed. I've just been really humbled by the folks that have turned up. I mean, you listen to stories of, it's some Muslim American manufacturer. I sat down with, a Palestinian immigrant, and he goes, this American system that the founders that we're celebrating 250 years next year, we're going to celebrate 250 years as a nation next year. And he goes, those folks in the 1700s that built a system based on the free enterprise system and private property rights has given this immigrant kid the opportunity to be successful here in Michigan. And I don't want to just look at it for the next election. I want to look at it for the next generation to make sure we're growing the state and that we have the policies that are implemented to allow the individual to thrive. And over the last few years here in Michigan, I think instead of looking at ways to manage a poorer, shrinking state, we need to look at those innovations to become a growing, successful, prosperous state.
Yeah. We're talking with State Senator Eric Nesbitt. We've got just less than 60 seconds to go here, sir. Your thoughts? So we know who you're going to vote for governor. We already have a good assumption there. Surprise in the U.S. Senate race, Gary Peters announcing his retirement earlier this year. What are your thoughts over there?
I think it's going to be a good year for Republicans next year. I think that's why Gary Peters decided not to run again. 2 is that a lot of the names that we're seeing on the Republican side, I'm looking forward to running as a team for U.S. Senate and winning back that seat to help help implement a reform agenda in D.C., winning the governor's race. There's going to be the attorney general, secretary of state, U.S. state Senate and state House all up next year. And so the direction of the state is going to be really determined in next year's election of how we're going to look for the next 10 or 20 years.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Come by anytime and give us another update. We love having you in studio here. State Senator Eric Nesbitt, he's the Republican leader. Thank you for spending time with us this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for covering the local issues that matter for Southwest
From
Michigan.
ABC News, I'm Brian Clark. New health concerns for Pope Francis. The 88-year-old's been hospitalized since Friday in Rome, and the Vatican